Asha Dore,
My name is Drew David Combs.
and this is Totally Biased Reviews.
Great.
Awesome. This is Totally Biased Reviews. I am Asha Dore,
And I am Rebecca Tourino Collinsworth.
and Rebecca was the director of this amazing play, Stamina. At a fertility clinic in the near future, Paloma and Merritt await the results of a sophisticated suite of tests to determine the viability of pregnancy. What they learn will test their marriage and their endurance. They're about to find out what it means to know too much. How do you define the momentum of this play?
Momentum was kind of the point. So in a literal sense, the setup of the plot contains its own momentum. So you're hearing stage 1, stage 2, and you know that stage 3 is coming. And the climax occurs at the end of stage 3, and it's the last line of the play. So there's no falling action, really, to speak of. And that kind of relentless forward momentum, even when the scenes in the clinic are broken up by flashbacks or the disaster fantasy sequences, that momentum is what I wanted for the play. It to me resembles the way life feels when you're always dealing with incomplete information and new wrinkles or new challenges or needs from people with whom you choose to be in relationship, and those needs come at you. So that's probably what I meant by the title.
Each of those stages of receiving information kind of pushes the play forward. And I think it's really interesting that the climax happens at the very end. I think it's helpful. And I think that the disaster scenes make that even more intense. It's like there are these little tiny climaxes inside of each disaster scene, which give you a little bit of release, like a pot that's boiling over, but you kind of lift it up from the stove.
Right. Instead of one big bang, a kind of a series of small bangs, and then a final at the end.
What were you trying to illustrate with the play? And how were you successful in doing that?
There are a couple of things that I think I saw myself being successful at illustrating. There are other things that maybe I was trying to illustrate, maybe that I'm not sure if I did it right. But the first thing, there's this point in your 30s, maybe, where people sometimes begin to feel that they're past their peak. And it's a really limited idea of a peak. I'm talking about what the world might consider a person's highest vitality overlapping with their highest optimism. The height of a sense of possibility, potential action. And so for me, it's kind of a threatening feeling, and it reminds me a little bit of, we're in Seattle, and it reminds me of right after the equinox. So there's this like idea in the summer, and it's like one day that has the most sun, and it's the most sun that you're ever going to have all year for the longest. And you know that once you pass that day, it's going to get a little bit less bright and a little bit less bright and a little bit less bright. And that threat of what's coming and not being able to see it, but just knowing it's just unavoidable, I think that's where Merritt and Paloma are in the play. So they have not achieved what they set out to achieve in their 20s. They achieved many other things, and they have many other amazing blessings and privileges in their lives. But what they're focused on is what they have not managed to do. And so now they're having to make these huge decisions at the same time, right at the point where they have the least helpful perspective, probably, and they feel the least capable. So it's an idea of a peak, which is worse than an actual peak, I think. It's the threat, the limitation, the sense of the heavy feeling of limitation, and it not ever getting better or easier, but rather always, always worse. The other thing that I was writing about was marriage. And that is a crazy idea. Marriage is nuts. I am married. I've been married a long time. We want so much to make informed choices, and we want to believe that in the play that having the right information and the right data will help us to avoid pain in the future. And in the play, it deals with, the future child, but where it really starts to turn the knob up on the tension is when these two married people who love each other look at each other and they go, I don't know if I'm going to like who you're going to be. And I don't know if you're going to like who I'm going to be. And that idea is so sad and scary. But that is, to me, marriage. Marriage is requires this leap of faith. Mm-hmm. And knowing that it's really likely that that's gonna end. It's completely counter to our romantic conceptions of, but it's, it's a beautiful idea. And I'm happily, I'd say, very happily married. How would I have known that when I got married? Those are the things that I think came through maybe the clearest.
From my position, it seems like that idea of limiting beliefs, I like that phrase, is really clear over and over in the play because, if they're at this peak, that's sort of defined by limiting beliefs. And then they get these statistics, and statistics are not facts, right? So it's a widespread limiting belief that a statistic has any actual meaning in your present moment. We can think something will probably happen, but then if it doesn't, it's like, oh, well, we were in the 2% that it didn't happen. Yeah. So what was the point of all the preparation? Statistics govern all really large portion of our limiting beliefs and whether we believe in which statistics and how they're worded, how they're formed, what tests create them and all that stuff. But then as this couple receives statistical information, they have to confront their limiting beliefs about what that might mean. What would it mean to have a kid with certain diagnoses? What would it mean if our marriage changed for this or that reason? But they can't possibly know what that will feel like or be like. They don't know what kind of stamina or grit they actually have. Most of us don't have the opportunity to confront our own grit or stamina until we're well past our 30s.
So they show up in a pretty privileged position. It made sense to me that these are white people, that live in New York and went to school and the fact that they could go to school in New York gives you a sense of what we're talking about. And Merritt had a really complex, difficult upbringing. And we don't hear that much about Paloma's upbringing. We don't know and we can't know what they've struggled with on the inside. And it's kind of not the point. I mean, the point is that we don't know and we can't know. Just like they can't know, or we look at our friends and we can't know what they're going through or have gone through.
Or how they've responded to that, which I think the response to something is really part of what drives the play forward, right? It's just responding to something that's not happening. Yeah. We do that all the time in our lives. I mean, how many decisions do we all make all the time that are about something that's not happening, that we're afraid of, we've experienced in the past, that we've never experienced, that we don't want to experience, that we want to experience. So we have to do this all the time. But when we do it in a way that it's life or death, will we bring another life into the world knowing this information that may or may not be true?
It is chaos.
And a reluctance to accept that chaos. It's sort of a drive to control the future.
Yes. Prepare.
I feel like in this play, the acceptance comes when everybody enters the present moment at the same time. It's oh, actually, this is the moment we're in right now. And I see everything and I don't care what might happen.
Right. Total emotional health does not make for good characters in drama. Although I really, really support that for life, for just life choices and how we treat other people in the world and how we protect ourselves in the world.
let's talk a little bit about the disaster scenes and maybe some of the craft devices that you used. In a play like this, you have to trust the audience to make their own decisions about the characters and about what's happening. Like, you're not giving them the answer at all. You're actually raising like a bunch of questions and really trusting the audience. And I think that if the audience doesn't pay attention, doesn't engage with the questions, that they might come out of the play going like, well, those were just some horrible people making horrible decisions. And I think that, you know, I would argue that most good plays are horrible people making horrible decisions.
Oh, yes.
And we get to like watch them as if we're in the room with them, which is so fun because it's real people in the same room with you making horrible decisions that you can judge however you want to without any kind of consequence. But I think that this play specifically there's so much lyric information. I think that the way that the couple communicates in the disaster scenarios does that too.
Some of that is really mysterious to me. It felt right. And in that sense, even though I've questioned whether those disaster sections are repetitive, I've continued to leave them in. There's some sort of dimension that they're functioning on for me that deepens the story, makes the story feel like more and mean more. And yes, it's more visceral or something. So there's like, I want to almost say like parasympathetic responses in your body, at least in my body. I can feel them in a different way. I think audiences are very smart and they need to be treated like they're the detective being invited to make sense of something. And that's all, you know, that's the kind of audience member that I like to be when I am taking in a piece of art. I seek out other kinds of entertainment when I don't want to think or engage. Conversely, I don't think that theater can be only about, like, it has to tickle and it has to stroke and it has to like smack a little bit and it has to do all of the things like so that people feel like their experience matters. It's not an intellectual exercise. The play, I hope, took the audience on an emotional journey that is frankly not something that we tend to just invite in our lives. And the intensity of the emotional journey in particular, I think, has to do with the sensitivity people have to the themes and circumstances in the play. So it felt, I think, personal to people and immediate and threatening in some ways that I don't think that my last play, Cowboys with Questions, whereas this, I feel like, is a little bit, it cuts a little closer to the bone for people. So the fact that the audience was willing to go on that journey, and that gets riskier and riskier, and they're investing in this married couple, and then they begin to see that these people's love is not perfect, and that these people are deluding themselves, and that they're blind to their blessings. One of the people in the audience said to me, "They're insufferable." I was like, "Yeah,
yep."
And then he said, "You know, but I cared about them anyway."
Yeah.
That's like, for me, that's a huge compliment, because that feels like, okay, we're owning our own tediousness, blindness, offensiveness. People were both uncomfortable and glad that they came.
This play deals with an experience that is very regular, that almost everyone experiences to some degree in a sort of utopian, dystopian near future. there's a specificity in the experience and what the characters are experiencing. Like they're receiving information about a certain diagnosis for their future child. And I think that everybody on this planet, if you live long enough, you either have to sit in a room with somebody diagnosing you or someone you love, and you have to figure out in your own head and or with other people how you're going to deal with that diagnosis and what that means for the future. And we don't talk about that space. We don't talk about the exam room very much.
Right.
It's a dreary ass topic. I think that we all are yearning for something that we don't know that we're yearning for. And it's to find a way to be entertained in a space that is uncomfortable, regular, and that will make it more acceptable to live in that space.
Right. Right. There is a sense of shared humanity in these kind of regular experiences. I mean, you're right. Everybody knows that feeling. I feel like by some point in their life, they get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And the helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
And the uncertainty, the lack of any sense of what is to come.
Mm-hmm.
And that to watch characters on a stage go through that experience. And it's like, there's not a big duel. Nobody's murdering anybody else, right? Like they are just in a room, maybe going to get divorced. Nobody actually wants to be there, but when they feel like they see other people,
Mm-hmm.
and people and other people beside them in the audience being like, I really felt that, right? Then they don't feel as alone is my hope. They
Mm-hmm.
feel, it brings us together.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is kind of a spiritual service.
Yeah.
That the actors, that the artists are providing for people coming and going through it with them.
Mm-hmm. It's activist art in a way that most people wouldn't define activist art. And I think that and the thing that's really interesting to me is that the characters are, like, of course, as most people are, kind of robustly ableist.
Yes.
But the play is not. These things that doctors tell us change our lives. And the way we respond to them, whether it's ableist or not, is still our feeling and our response. And so I think that the play allows people to see, like, it's okay if you have a shitty response to a diagnosis. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you don't love correctly. It doesn't mean that you're not adding value to the world. It just means that, you're getting a lot of new information about something that's going away that you thought you might have.
Yes.
What are some of the things you'd like to leave the audience thinking about as they leave?
The payoff, I think, for the audience kind of enduring with these characters, the highs and the lows, is the last moment of the play. That is the kind of what I hope is the purging of this scary kind of ugly feelings that we're ashamed that we have, the fears that we won't own as our true experience and our limitations and our responsibility, right, to cope with. And we don't want to look at that stuff because it's painful.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to purge that and feel that with knowing everything and knowing how much they don't know, these characters ultimately, it's a very simple process for them to say yes and to have their kids say yes back. Like, it's straightforward and that feeling of relief is kind of, I hope, an affirmation of what humans are capable of.